Mitchell's vs. Machines is a single movie that I've had a full 180 with. I was there when the trailer dropped, and I was there when it crossed its anniversary. Just 4 years, but I thought it was special enough to mention. I had low hopes for this movie at first, but it turned around to be my favourite movie of 2021. But it's fun to look back and see all my opinions slowly manifest over time, so here's a stitch-up of all of our coverage of Mitchell's vs. Machines. Going way back to when it wasn't even that, it was simply a trailer called Connected. So, just over a month ago, things were a little hectic on this corner of the internet as there were seemingly movie trailers and teasers being released everywhere in a wave all at once. And with me trying to be the trailer coverage kind of guy, I got a little overwhelmed. And though I'm sure many of those trailers are now regretting their release date announcements amidst all of this, one of those trailers that slipped through the cracks back then was Sony Pictures' latest animation project, Connected. Now, the actual title of this film slipped my mind as I started the script because it really wasn't that outstanding, but the actual content within the trailer was something I couldn't forget. And that's simply because it just comes off as such a beautiful mess, chaotically mashing together several traits that make it seem like both a doomed trash pile of content, along with even more sources of what seems to be some cinematic greatness. I have no idea if this film is amazing or disastrous. You might not remember it as Connected, or the Mitchells vs. the Machines as it was originally called, but as the one with the pug in it. You get what they're trying to do here. Illumination Studios has mastered the art of broad audience spectacle, and this is Sony's marketing nudges towards the perfect middle-aged mum bait. Everyone likes dogs, especially the goofy ones. Now, Connected follows the conflict between Rick Mitchell and his daughter, Katie. When she was young, the family would often go out on nature hikes and enjoy each other's companionship, but now in the modern day, Katie is absolutely obsessed with her phone, not getting to truly experience life in front of her eyes. So, in a last-ditch effort to knock some sense into her, the dad sends Katie off to her dream college, not through a normal plane trip, but with one final road trip as a family. It's your classic boomer oldie shouting at clouds about how warped technology has become and how it's ruining the experiences of the younger generation, who are all glued to their phones. Blah 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 blah, technology bad. Except, it's not. At the same time, we're seeing elements of the other side of the argument, with the children and even the dad sometimes using technology for their own benefits, and finding a happy medium for the family to combine with. Clearly, as the hike continues, despite the diverging opinions and usage, the film is all about following the slow growth of a family as they begin to understand each other and become a more close-knit and connected family unit. Now that sounds pretty good. It's all about compromise and family. Except, it's not that either. No, this is all about a robot uprising instead, with corporation bigwig Pow revealing the helper bots who immediately activate to enslave all of humankind. Now, with their seeming advantage over the bots, they are tasked with saving the world as a family. It's an action thriller instead. Oh, and don't forget, technology bad. The dad was right all along. That's the moral of the story. This really doesn't look too great. I'm all for plot twists, but what's a robot invasion doing in my sweet family trip movie? And beyond that, what is the messaging behind this film? To highlight technophobia and shoot down the kids who can't get off their damn phones? Or is it the reverse, at being jaded and off to what is reality in the world? Or being stuck in the past? Is it about monopolies? Is it about corporations? And though clearly with at least 2 entire generic film plots crammed together, this is set to be some kind of train wreck, the outer context of this film is actually looking pretty good. This project is being made by Sony Pictures Animation, so it's already a tad hit and miss. But the producers of this film are Lord and Miller, the direct reason we have such massive successes such as Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Lego Movie, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. These guys know how to make good films. And on top of that, this film is being co-directed by former writers of Gravity Falls, more top-tier crew members. Looking at all of their track records, this film should come off as an absolute masterpiece. which only makes things more confusing as there's clearly so many elements that can go wrong so up front in the project, and there's so many weird decisions slid into this film. But before we dive properly into that, we're gonna attempt to piece the entire film together through this trailer alone in chronological order. Actually, there's a second edit of this trailer released for the UK, and that gives us a couple more extracts of footage to use, so we'll be bouncing off of that too. If you haven't already though, feel free to subscribe during these trying times, and don't forget, only you can help the fight against my burgeoning unsub viewer ratio. So we start off with the dad, Rick Mitchell, solemnly watching back old memories of the good old days using his old video camera, presumably down in the basement he calls his happy place. There we see that when Katie Mitchell was young, she was a far more desirable daughter, having a clear connection with her father and happy to take in life with her own eyes. Cut ahead to today, and Katie is a completely different person. She's still a quirky little lass, but she pumps all of her passion into technology, aiming high with her dream course in film all the way in California. It's kinda hard to pinpoint exactly when events take place, as across all of these days, every character wears the exact same outfits, even before the road trip starts. But hey, can't shoot down Katie always wearing that pride pin. Now Katie's a bit of a creative, creating all sorts of artwork, patch stickers and puppetry videos with that video camera. Think towards the end her dad will rewatch this clip on the camera and eventually see the magic that she can create with technology? With this being the final day with the family, Katie decides to create them all a goodbye video to show at the dinner table. Though Rick's adamant rules to enforce some real family time cuts into the moment as the rest of the family clearly struggle to connect without their screens to look at. And though Katie has something good to show, her dad just cannot get to the end of it without creating some kind of conflict. We can also see the actual video is the whole family represented as her sock puppets from before. Maybe the dad didn't like looking like the grumpy one. Also, their colours all represent the colours of the clothes they wear for most of the movie, with Katie's puppet thinking about rainbows and vomiting it out too. You think this is too much analysis to think this is insinuating something in the background? Before the video reaches its end, the dad demands no screens at the table, so Katie tries to take it away against the wishes of a now regretful father. The conflict of course breaks the laptop and sets off more of the conflict of the film, though I will say for a moment, this writing moment as it's edited in the trailer here isn't too hot. The adamant screen rule when someone's showing you something seems awfully forced, especially with it being a special occasion, and the trope of fighting over something till it breaks is just a cliche and uninspired. But it does cause this strong, vile line, I love it.
This is exactly why I'm excited to leave tomorrow.
Katie.
Also, didn't this scene start off in the day with the lights off? Why did that suddenly change later? Is it a breakfast scene followed by a day of everyone doing their normal things and then a day of, hey, look what I made and fight over something? Time? Or is this just a trailer inconsistency? With Katie upset, the UK trailer actually reveals a hint more content with this one line from the father as the dad wallows with his consequences.
I gotta get that connection back.
I know you can fix this.
Way to keep it on the nose. Cutting to the next day, and though today is now plain day, the dad has hijacked the trip into a road trip instead as an attempt to make up to his daughter and bond with his family in one last attempt. The UK trailer also gives us a tad more of this scene with the mum telling us that the dad went rogue on the idea and the son thinking it might be fun.
Mom, your father kind of went rogue on this.
Aaron, you too?
Could be cool to hang out.
For hours in a car.
Also, my god, why is the son's voice lower pitched than the dad? I can understand it as a gag if he rarely speaks and the deepness is part of the joke, but just having it here in passing makes it seem like someone miscast the two characters around. It's jarring and unnecessary. The film then interestingly gives us this shot which gives me higher hopes for the directing, as it's a lot more creatively unique. With Katie being such a creative soul, it makes sense to give her Tracy Beaker-esque 2D expressions. I hope more of these kind of Spider-Verse effects come into fruition, as I really like these. So they drive, at the very least, from Michigan to California, just 36 hours and 2,400 miles to go. Yes, of course I googled that, I'm British, I don't know where Michigan is. And I doubt these billboards mean anything, but most of them may be suggesting the next scene that they go to, but if there's a secret there, I missed it. Here's Monchi the pug doing more marketable things, eating flies as you do, you know how it is. And then here's Katie taking things into her own hands by vlogging some fun into the adventure. Fun fact, the UK trailer starts out with this and then choppily cuts up all of the dialogue in the trailer. It's disgraceful. Also, this joke...
Dang it, Katie! Dang it, Katie! Sure, dang it, Katie!
I'm not a fan. Well, I like the concept about it, but the actual catchphrase element of it feels forced. Maybe I'd like it more if it was realistically spread across the film instead of edited back to back. At one point, we get back to this original scene with them in a store. Again, this scene screams boomer humor, with even the kitty filter being condescendingly arrogant, essentially saying that Gen Z and other younglings are completely tone deaf to their elders. Ugh, it just feels distasteful to me. As they continue food stop to food stop, eventually the trip is interrupted as the kids want to watch the new conference by PAL, some sort of Apple copycat and the host of Katie's old laptop. Almost as big a monopoly as the Sony corporation in this film. They're revealing the new helper-bot that they promise will never ever turn evil. First of all, helper-bot? That's a bad name. They've literally got PAL on their chest. Also, this line?
We promise you they will never, ever turn evil.
Poor delivery too. Even the captions thought that they said either or ether or something. Anyway, the UK trailer shows us a whole lot more footage of the conference, with the robots immediately flying up, jamming the doors and announcing,
"Please remain calm while we capture you."
With the robots activated, they all fly out of the PAL building and soon across the entire world. By the time they reach the family, it's still daytime of presumably the same day. Interestingly though, you'd assume them seeing the event live on their phones would jolt them into action, escaping by car or trying to hide somewhere safe or something, but by the time it reaches them, they're all just casually at another store. Maybe the dad forces them to close it before they see the climax of it all. Presumably, they now land all across the globe, from American streets, national landmarks, and even Tokyo, where we see a man being frozen and chucked into a hexagon seat, basically with the same tech as Syndrome's weapon. This is the main plan of the evil robots. Thanks UK trailer for pointing that out. Here's one landing at the same time of day with the same clouds, so I imagine this is actually near the family, as opposed to this one that's almost gone dark by now. The family is understandably shook. Thought I'd throw in some youngling lingo in there. The next most matching shot is then the family in this same building releasing their breath from behind a counter. Perhaps here is where they first see a human being captured and manage to hide away from the searching robots. With these windows all clear and exposing, they make moves to eventually board it up and stay buckled here for the time being. Though actually, the UK trailer also shows us this same sunset scene with the dad attacking the robots mid-invasion, only to be flown way up high. Perhaps though not necessarily winning the fight, this allows the family to hide away as he too escapes in a freezer to win the fight, and then choosing to stay hidden amidst everything else, with a plan being formed somewhere along the line after being boarded up in the building based on this shadow, which looks like a boarded piece of wood. Maybe the plan's an escape plan the next day, and as the dark settles in, here's Katie potentially on the roof or something watching the invasion in the skies, with all movements going upwards. Think it's all the hexagon seats being taken to their host? Whatever the case, at some point the plan falls through as two robots eventually crash through their barricades, only to be confused by the existence of the pug.
Dog, pig, loaf of bread.
This joke, I also am not the biggest fan of. It's not the worst. I like the pig-dog bit, but probably would have preferred that bit milked a little longer. The loaf of bread makes me roll my eyes. Whatever the case, it causes them to short circuit like any good Deus Ex Machina plot device does. Or maybe it's just edited to look like that's what happened. And fun fact, these two robos actually become friendlies that help the family out. Actually, here they are behind Katie as she says, "The Mitchells have always been here, that's what makes us great." I guess they're suggesting they know this place better than most? Or some family pep talk? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Anyway, every other scene basically has blue sky, so let's assume it's the next day. There's a toilet humor toilet break that next leads to this car chase. My guess is the family, now knowing that humans are being taken away, plan to tackle the problem by following the skies to the PAL factory to defeat the robots themselves somehow. Look, there's the two robots from before, though they've got a third one on their tail to get rid of. And finally, though this could have easily started earlier in the plotline, another element of this invasion becomes clear. The direct story synopsis tells us that all electronic devices join in the tech uprising, assuming they're influenced by PAL's monopoly as well. Either through a PAL chip like this toaster, or a PAL router like in here. The UK trailer also shows us drones are in on it too. PAL's got a little bit of Amazon in them as well, especially with that logo. So if the family goes to the root of the problem with the PAL factory, then I imagine here is where they'd reach this scene. Surrounded by a mall-esque room of electronics, all equipped with PAL's influence. And hey, there's our robo buddies, now with fake faces plastered onto them. Neat. As I assume a big conflict begins, the family survives this attack, and somewhere along the line even learn how to fight the robots as they earn the weapon of one of the robots themselves. In a sudden spike of activity, Katie and Rick are now miles up in the air. Just kind of run with it. That's the only footage we've got. Katie uses the telekinetic technology to destroy those black drones in the sky, whilst Rick catches her on the back of one of the robo-friends. And though this is the last of the footage, you can imagine with the powers to defeat the robots, they smash all they can and release all the humans from their cages. Perhaps that's even what the other two are doing at this point. What happens to Katie's college life? Is the message of technology hatred being okay? Is it about monopolies instead? And what is this symbol way off in the ground? Is it a hologram from the factory, or just some weird lasery thing, or just distant robots in queues? That alone has stumped me. I can't tell what it is. Other than that, that's pretty much the entire plotline I can muster from this film. Why is almost the entire plotline in the trailer, you ask? Marketing! All the best trailers spoil 90% of their films, and you know that 50% of the screen time is otherwise just going to be spent on Monchi the pug. There's also all sorts of other confusing factors to this film. Why is the editing so bad on the UK trailer with its splicing? How can mashing several tired plot pieces that we've seen before possibly work in a satisfactory way? And though we trust the people, this is director Mike Rianda's debuting role. Will that cause any issues as well? We also see one scene with that proper artsy flair, but everything else is just kind of missable. Hopefully that won't be too much of a waste of potential. I don't like it when it's small and unnoticeable. I want the bigger stuff as well. But on the flip side of things, so many things seem to be going right for this film. I don't hate this right off the bat, I'm just left a little conflicted, as seemingly always. That blinking joke at the table isn't actually too bad, and the final licking scene in the trailer's pretty good. I like the naturalistic delivery of jokes that are supposed to be a real moment, not some kooky whipped up catchphrase moment. There's a lot going on in this movie. There's a lot of varying elements all cramming into one spot. Some big name creators and some low tier storytelling, some intriguing artistic direction and some baffling voice casting, generic and basic marketable shill, and potentially a heartfelt familial adventure dug a little under the surface. I am excited for this film because I have no idea what my response to it will be, as it seems like a yin-yang of amazing and trashy. But that just makes me all the more intrigued to see where this film possibly ends up. Opening this trailer for the first time made me think it was Illumination's copycat with that big pug up front. But looking more into it, it's clear there's a more complex story being told. But what exactly that story is telling is something we'll just have to wait for another 5 months for. Wait, what? This movie's being delayed in the UK till October? Oh, well, screw that. I guess there's no review from me then. Boo to the distributors. Why you gotta shoot us down like that? Though with the way things are going, I guess anyone getting to see this film in October is probably getting a bit of a miracle. For now though, let's just agree that seeing a movie in an actual cinema is really nice, whether it's September, October, or any time of year. I'll be watching with eager but confused eyes The Mitchells vs. the Machines or Connected the moment I get a chance. So yeah, this film, shall we talk about it a little bit? Because when I first saw the trailer, I don't know what to expect. I was very confused. I had high hopes for it, but something about it was just like, oh, this has the room to be really bad. And watching it now, I can happily say, hey, it's pretty good. But no, I actually really enjoyed this movie. I was worried at first because there is that theme of like the boomer dad dislikes all kids' technologies. But it was actually just like a good character design rather than like hee ha ha kids stupid kind of storyline. It was a nice balance of the both, and I was like originally a little bit skeptical. I was a little skeptical of how they could play it off, but actually it just seemed like it was, there's a boomer character like him, and then there's a Gen Z millennial character in her, and they just both have their own dynamics, kind of cliched in like we've heard it before, but just also kind of relatable. That's kind of what they were going for. I don't know, I just really liked it, and I thought actually it played off quite well in just, it's just got character archetypes that they wanted to show off. There were jokes that were a lot more older generation than I expected for the millennial part. Like Like, you know, they were singing to Numa Numa, which was from like 2008, which I guess that was the point, because that moment came from like 2008. But still, it was a lot less Gen Z and a bit more millennial, but I mean, that was fine. The directing was especially really astounding. Less so, well, the emotional bits were good too, but like the comedy was really, really good in a lot of places, which is ironic because now it's only showing the emotional parts, but whatever. Like there was the bit earlier you just saw where like the mom's going down like this massage chair and then the daughter picks her up, but like they're moving and the daughter's not moving. Like, just like that kind of goofy element I really, really enjoyed. But what are your guys' thoughts on it? You've seen this trailer before and you was at an absolute loss. Yeah, I was like a bit confused on like the pug element that they introduced and like how, I guess it was just going for like the easy, funny dog comedy. It actually paid off quite nicely. I mean, the dog was there most of the time shuffling about, but there it is. I guess I should say spoilers. I'll say this in advance now then, like, hey, spoilers. There are, you know, the story happens. But I mean, I have no idea actually what happens in what order. You can kind of predict it as well though. Like watching the trailer, I think I made a prediction of like, you know, the family is the last of a robot apocalypse. They saved the world. That is the plot. But all in all, I found it really enjoyable. And I think a part that really like brought it over at the end was I learned to not be so cynical about it because the film took itself less and less seriously. When the film is intentionally just being goofy and weird, it's really nice. I don't know, like I could just get behind it a bit more. And like I think most of the story beats are pretty on point. I don't really pay attention to like how the actors perform very much in movies in general. Like if you know they're if they're a character, they're a character. I'm invested in that. I don't notice, oh, you know, that's Angelina Jolie. It doesn't click in my head, so that's all fine. But it came out a lot better than what I was hoping it wouldn't be. You know, it was really enjoyable. There was a good chunk. There's a good chunk in like the second third that they didn't use any of the trailer footage for, and I'm super appreciative of that. I really enjoyed that. This is a Sony Pictures animated movie that then moved to Netflix. I don't know why, but if you open Netflix, for me at least, it was like the big loud thing that's showing up. There's something else from Sony Pictures being made that's also coming to Netflix. I don't know why. It's a transition thing they're doing right now. So, extra easy to access. I recommend you watch it. It's a nice, just wholesome family bit, you know? It will be more connective to the if you're the correct age, you know? A parent that's about to say goodbye to their child at college or university will probably find this a bit more attaching than me, who's 25, or I'm not 25, I'm 24. Ugh. Don't need my quarter life crisis yet, but there we go. But yeah, I don't really think I've got any other major thoughts. I liked it more than I expected to, which is nice in itself, you know? I also really like, there's clearly that Spider-Verse element, because it's made by the same people. You know, this is a Lord Miller production, I believe. So, like, I just liked some of the like, there's all these little 2D imagery add-ons that are really fun. And then, like, they have, like, I remember watching from, like, I followed some of the animators on Twitter now, where, like, the grass in the background is actually a paint tool that they did based off of the stuff that happened in Spider-Verse. It's just really good, you know? I predicted some of the elements that came up later, but I think it's because I've watched too many movies, you know? When you see, this is a thing that upsets the robots, it's like, surprise, surprise, they're going to use that thing to upset the robots later. But it was still just a big overall fun time thing. And I really liked the credits where they just show their actual families, which was really, really sweet. It's just, icing on the cake kind of deal, you know? So, really, really fun. The animation style is both conventional and unique at the same time. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's really, I could watch more in this style. I can't explain it. It's like, it's not got that Sony slapstick. It's got an element of that. Like, there is that motion, but it doesn't look so plastic and weird. It's a really nice art style that I can actually really appreciate. Yeah, I would just, I'd like to see more of this kind of style. And the type of comedy, the dialogue was actually really good in a lot of places. It's still a little weird that the little brother has such a low-pitched voice, but I got used to it, you know? I liked how it all kind of came together. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other thoughts that they'd like to say? Because while putting while it's great and all that I can just make these now quickly and I can put it on the second channel, I can review every movie under the sun at any rate I want to, I've been putting myself on the spot this whole time, so I haven't scripted any of this at all. Whereas, you know, the original, I have all sorts of high intelligence scripted thoughts. I want to have a red hoodie now because of her. Like, I'm like, that actually looks really nice. And then get someone else in stark yellow and a guy in stark purple and a guy in whatever colors they're wearing. I'm like, actually, maybe I should color palette myself. Hence why I'm wearing red today. Plus it goes against the blue very nicely. But, you know, it's cartoony almost, this design. Yeah, absolutely. It's 100% cartoony. They do a lot of cartoony fun stuff, you know. It's just really like nice and heartwarming. I imagine if I showed this to my mum, she'd cry, you know, that kind of thing. Or like I would find it a lot more emotionally hitting if I just moved to university, you know. It was just a really nice, fun film. And yeah, obviously it's a shame it got delayed. It was a little weird that they changed from Mitchell's vs. the Machines to Connected, and then they changed the names back to Mitchell's vs. the Machines. But I mean, it paid off in all sorts of ways. I hope it pays off as well. See, obviously it just becomes a Netflix show. I didn't pay a penny for this. And so it's kind of sad on that front, because I feel like the team looks like they probably had a lot of fun with this, you know? In lots of different ways. So, oh well. I hope the movie the best. Overall, I think, you know? It's just one of those things. Yeah, it's just really, I would recommend, even if you've seen like all these shots in this review, and I'll work out this formula in a bit, over time. I still just would recommend watching it. It's just a nice, fun thing to do. Plus, I mean, we're all sat indoors anyway, so we might as well, you know, do something for 2 hours or an hour and a half, however long this is. What about the things that aren't made by PAL? Do they still get corrupted? No, doesn't look it. I imagine everything else isn't smart enough to, you know? Like, an actual toaster can't do much, and it doesn't need to. It's just... A lot of times, though, I think, because this film is so goofy and doesn't take itself too seriously, these kind of cynicalisms I can't really get into, you know? Because it's like, yeah, whatever. There's a lot of moments where, like, the robots will be like, look at these people. And then it's at an angle that they would never act. It's like, it was the film's angle. And I'm like, hey, they wouldn't have gotten that angle. They would have been over here. And it's like, nah, get over it. It's kind of like, I don't usually do that for most films. Usually I'm like, you gotta get your angles right. But they didn't this time, so. But yeah, it was just a really nice family film, you know? It's like, I will show it to my family at some point. And like, hey, she's a film student. That lines up with me, although she's a bit more puppetry, which is more Carrie's thing. But, I don't know. It was overall a really good movie. Clearly, I need to work on my formula for this section, but like, I would like to, in the future, now that I can just watch more movies, make more reviews, make them in this little... maybe with a bit more preparation work that doesn't glitch my entire computer up, get it all pieced together, and then send them all out. And it should be a really nice thing to do going forwards, I think. It seems like a lot of fun, you know? So, with that in mind, I don't think I've got much else I need to say about, Mitchell's vs. the Machines. It's just a good, fun romp. Romp. Without the T. But there you are. Phew. What a movie, Mitchell's vs. Machines. A real breath of fresh air amongst the barrage of modern day movies, incorporating 2D elements into a 3D production in a way that feels fluid and functionally on theme. Not to mention the plotline and messaging as a whole is top notch, with a fantastic execution of lovable characters and enjoyable moments. They managed to make the phone-hating boomer not cringe. What a miracle! And so I wanted to revisit this hidden goldmine of a movie 2 years on, well, 1.5 years on, by celebrating one of the very best highlights of this highlight of a film. So what was the scene that changed Mitchell's vs. Machines? Not just elevating it from the classic good movie to a great one, but to win over us unknowing audience who admittedly came into this with a closed mind, expecting bad boomer humor and a poor anti-youth messaging. Today we're rolling into 1 hour 13 minutes of the total runtime with the turning point of Katie and Rick's relationship. God, how do I get around all the context up to this point? Robot uprising, and practically everyone in the entire human population has already been kidnapped into little pods and stacked together by this point. They're alright though, there's Wi-Fi in there. But the actual crux of the plot we need to be focusing on is the familial connections. Saving all of humanity can wait. Rick Mitchell here is your classic boomer dad with his classic boomer opinions. At least when it comes to technology. He hates phones at the table and doesn't understand technology that well himself. Adding on to it even further, he's a nature's man, loving nothing more than exploring out into the woods, camping together and learning all the classic survival skills like a good Boy Scout. He is the embodiment of nature, whilst his daughter is modern and new and young. She likes her phone like everyone in her generation and even has developed skills in filmmaking specifically with her laptop. And unfortunately, the two of them never really see eye to eye anymore. And all the hijinks of the movie have begun with a force-fed family road trip to take Katie to university as opposed to a simple plane. So the conflict is already there and being dragged along with every single mile. Now, in a prior scene, we have seen that the two used to get on beautifully back when Katie was just a little kid, and it's clear that the dad wants to go back to that golden period. And of course, Katie feels the same way to a certain extent, but he never really appreciates her in her own ideals and uses of technology. So now jump to the start of our current scene, and the parents too have just been nabbed away into the super final evil lair of our corporate overlords. The dad just looking disappointedly as he's failed his kids and sent away. And so, with nothing else to do, the kids Katie and Aaron run. Grand green lighting above them and the synthy soundtrack. Ominous as the robot takeover is fully into effect. And as they hide in the shadows, the robots continue to survey the area to find the last two escaped human beings. And with the dark turn of events of it all, Aaron just breaks down crying. No dogs can cheer him up now. But it's not the robots that have upset him.
Why'd you say all that stuff?
To add more salt into the wound, the Mitchells split up not on good terms, as in their final moments together, Pal, that's the evil AI antagonist here, revealed to the parents Katie's last deception from an hour ago. In trying to motivate the family to get back up on their feet again, Katie went out of her way to give Rick the pep talk he wanted to hear, saying all the classic beats like,
The world needs you. I need you.
And in the moment, it seemed like they had skipped straight to the end of that story arc, with the two of them bonding together again and compromising on their differences, only for Katie to turn around moments afterwards in secret to spill.
Oh, I was just telling him what he wants to hear. I didn't mean to order that. I just want to get my future back and get away forever.
It was all just a lie to get Rick back into motion again, emotional manipulation at its finest. And its words you can tell straight away hurt Aaron in the background. And now, having actually reached that arc ending, what does Katie have to say for herself?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to... I don't know.
Regardless, it's where they are now. And so in search of some fruit snacks, they both then come across that age-old camcorder, the very one Katie has been using all trip to document the journey and vlog her way through the pain.
Is that what you're looking for?
It's those childhood memories again. But before we can understand it properly here, let's revisit the moment earlier in the runtime at the 13-minute mark outright. Rick is having a sad, nostalgic moment to himself watching these old tapes with Katie. We see her happily on his shoulders, greeting him ecstatically at the door and dancing like goofballs in the kitchen. And some of the less fun times of crying the first day of school and feeling better after getting a wooden moose.
You know how to say I love you in moose language? Let me just...
Before Rick wipes his face and gets back into action for the next day. Flash forward again to Aaron catching these scenes himself, and he's just watching them silently. He's at that numb phase where he's just soaking it in. Not too unlike Dad, really. Until he eventually pipes up with...
How far back do these go?
Hey, Katie.
Skimming past all the prior footage, or at least whatever's left after Katie has been unknowingly recording over them this whole trip, until we come to the surprise reveal...
Bye-bye, hon.
You ready, hon?
It's just a single shot, and yet it tells 1,000 words. Rick has always been a nature's man, familiar with all the tools of the trade in regards to survival and camping, camouflage in one deleted scene and so on, so you know that a wooden house in the middle of nowhere would be the idyllic house for a guy like this. And then you see the sold sign.
Almost.
I know this is hard for you.
The sky draped in golden sunset, perfect for the shining of the golden days as well as symbolic of the coming end. It's a side of Rick we have not seen this entire movie. We only know the aftermath and not the somber before times he had. And yet, with everything we've learned about Rick up until now, we would imagine this is a hard sacrifice to finally have to make.
Nah. It's easy.
But then there it is. As much as Rick has shown his love for the great outdoors, nothing could ever possibly outweigh his love for his daughter and his family. And only now is Katie truly coming to terms with that. And that one glance from the camera tells you it all. Animated characters can act with their eyes now. And then, for one final punch to the gut,
One last something to remember the place by.
that tiny wooden moose. It was a part of the old house all along. And as Katie pulls it out from her bag herself, you can remember all the other times it's cropped up in the movie. Right before Aaron gets the camcorder, Katie has to go through it first. When Rick is having his trip down memory lane, he's stroking it after wiping his face, and it's the very gift that calmed young Katie down on her first day of school. Perhaps the reason Katie even is accidentally taping over it on this road trip is because Rick put the tape in to watch it the night before the travels. And as Katie looks at the wooden moose with new revelations, it all gets to her.
Oh, man.
Before turning that sadness into motivation.
Aaron, I'm gonna make it up to all of you. And I think I know how.
And with that, they skirt out of their little hole and return to the evil lair. What follows is a bombastic display of destroying robots with a pug's face, suddenly having incredible mother-protecting skills, monologuing about the goodness of humanity, and then destroying everything at a hoverboard laser gun fest. You know, the classic jumping off point from a movie about familial bonds. You can always expect a movie to have some sort of sad turning point right before the final act, but this one continues to blow us out of the water for how well interconnected it all feels, and how it rolls out so naturally to get across that point. Not to mention the replay value as you learn to watch that wooden moose. And of course, the messaging itself strikes right through the heart of many very real people. There are a lot of families who don't see eye to eye, whether it be on nature versus technology or some other thing. But it is also the case for a lot of families that hidden sacrifices have been made for the sake of families that often goes underappreciated or unnoticed. And seeing the way these two make up in a genuinely realistic way, forgetting the hoverboard laser fight of course, is something that is incredibly rare to see in an animated movie these days. So when it hits right, it really hits it out of the park. Mitchell's vs. Machines is chock full of all sorts of great moments and boosts of animation, but this is the scene that struck a chord with me, and is the one I remember the most after I watched it for the first time. Well, that and the scenes of Rick using computers, of course. Who am I kidding? That should have been in the running for best scene. Forget this emotional crap. But yeah, coming out on the other side of this scene, I was more than satisfied with the existence of this movie. I came into this skeptical as hell, waiting for a boomer humor trash party on the young and their goddamn phones, and came out of it with a beautiful blending of this generational divide that puts in a good perspective on both sides of the table. Plus, if you're gonna shoot down technology, at least they did it in the right way.
It's almost like stealing people's data and part of an unregulated tech monopoly was a bad thing.
Yeah, that wasn't your best thought.
Hell yeah. But anyway, that's enough gushing about a 2-minute segment of a movie. Believe it or not, Mitchell's vs. Machines is now over 3 years old, initially releasing back on April 22nd, 2021. And so, as part of this fresh-faced anniversary series of ours, I'd like to have a look at the movie itself and see how it's influenced animation since then. As I would probably say, this is one of the best movies of the decade. A real contender for my top 50 movies of all time. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully construct a list like that, but this movie was mad good. Produced with the same studio and creative team involved, it's typically seen as the movie that proved Spider-Verse wasn't a fluke, and you could make movies that took on more dynamic animation styles. And the fact this came out in the middle of lockdown's honestly a miracle. However, is there more to this project than just the second one after Spider-Verse from Sony? God love A Bug's Life, but, you know, its legacy for Pixar is often just the second one after Toy Story, and does not necessarily meet the same heights of the golden era that followed it. I don't know if anyone's ever made a comparison between A Bug's Life and Mitchell's vs. Machines before, and that probably makes sense because I would argue they have not fallen down the same pitfall from the 90s. at all. But it's worth remembering because we had no idea that at the time, a lot of the odds were very much against this movie. Going back to 2015, after finishing up his acclaimed Disney XD series Gravity Falls, Mike Rianda was tasked to pitch a new project for Sony Animation. When developing the original idea, I was surprised to hear that he started with the concept of literally just combining his personal family experience with his childhood love of robots. Suddenly it kind of makes sense that in the credits it showcases a whole chunk of the cast and crews and their actual families. And of course, the family part's obviously the most important factor, and very much why the movie is as good as it is. You can just tell by the finished product that there is so much truth and authenticity to the central family relationship, and it's done in a way that, doesn't really talk down to anyone or any generation. The part that surprises me, though, is the fact that the whole tech apocalypse plot kind of started as, I like robots, but I guess you gotta start somewhere. And it just goes to show that great ideas don't just pop up, they develop over time. And the very fact that they even were platformed to be able to tell an original story is, obviously done before with the likes of Gravity Falls for them, but also is very much a fading thing in the modern day. And it's only been 3 years. Now, during the early day productions of this project, the movie's original working title was Control-Alt-Escape, which certainly wouldn't be the last example of a dramatic title change, but also it kind of works really well. Cut to 2018 and we get to the point where Phil Lord and Christopher Miller come onto the project as producers. This would be their 4th collaboration with Sony Animation, following the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs movies and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, of course, as well as the 6th Sony collaboration overall when you factor in the Jump Street movies. At a festival in 2019, it was revealed by a Sony representative that the animation style being adjacent to Spider-Verse was a conscious choice, and in a very Spider-Verse manner, the robots and Mitchell family would be from different universes that would then collide. And finding this from the research, this is really interesting, as this is a concept that isn't just absent from the finished movie, it's miles away from what we eventually got. It does make me wonder at what point the plot switched from this alternative dimension plotline. Unless it was a poorly worded piece of press that they just meant the animation styles are a little different between organic and inorganic. As obviously later on they would then go into the tech company gone mad angle. And considering that was kind of the main point, and it makes you wonder, was there a point when the two were connected? Was there a point where Pow was going to open a portal to the robots rather than dispatching the robots herself? No idea. I feel this more came from Sony executives going, put as many Spider-Verse things in the movie as possible, which I'm very glad they didn't do. This movie manages to be both exorbitantly bombastic in a way that is akin to the Spider-Verse movies, while so clearly being its own thing with its own creative direction. Really, that's the best of both worlds. And to be fair, you do have Mr. Gravity Falls involved, which also played with some interdimensional stuff, so it could very well have been his idea. Whatever the case, we instead got the tech company exploiting AI to the world's detriment, which becomes scarily more topical by the year. And as much as my voice can be replaced by AI, and I have once plugged myself into a song to hear how it would sound, I feel like the more communal vibes we have here, and the actual fact that I have a personality, means I can hopefully squeak by against the AI uprising in later years. We'll see. Also, some of the self-aware commentary beats about exploitative tech companies is wild when you consider that this was put out by Sony of all companies. I mean, they're no Apple, but still, it's a tech company taking digs at tech companies. Now, what did unfortunately get through from the top brass was probably the second name change for the movie. Having gone from Control-Alt-Escape to Mitchell's vs. the Machines, many were surprised when the first promotional material had the movie being marketed as Connected. In fact, actually, I have quite a bit of anecdotal experience around the first promotional material, as it was one of the earliest animated movie trailers that I proper hopped on and discussed because I didn't see people discussing it enough. And back then, we had no idea of the actual messaging and heart that would make this final product. And so in a lot of ways, it was a really interesting 50-50, or at least that was my first impression at the time, as it was very clearly kind of having that boomer discussion of phones bad, technology bad, young kids are stupid. Or at least that was the vibe you got from the trailer, as it was talking about the main conflict with the family. And then, yeah, at the end of that movie, slap bang in big text and somewhere on some hashtags along the bottom was the word connected. A nice-ish pun for family relationships and technology, but to be honest, it was an awful title for the movie. Still, I hold a weird bubble of nostalgia for those uncertain times, and it's probably the most biggest, satisfying reveal I've seen from trailer to movie since I started this YouTube thing. but actually switching for a final time properly to Mitchells vs. the Machines, and damn, that's a good title. I mean, when going forwards with such a generic single-word title like Connected has all the quirkiness and vibrance of the movie completely absent from it, you know? And I almost feel like if the movie had been released theatrically like that, the marketing would have completely derailed this movie. Set for a January 2020 release originally, this movie was then delayed to September 2020. However, for those eagle-eyed viewers out there, a whole thing happened between January and September that completely changed the world, and it wasn't a robot apocalypse. Indeed, COVID-19 and the grand procession of lockdowns that followed meant that movies in the cinema weren't a hugely viable thing anymore. And that is an interesting point for the direction of where this movie and its impact goes. Consequently, as the very first move, Sony passed on the rights to Netflix to release the movie. And side note, can we just appreciate that Sony's the only major studio to have played the streaming wars completely differently? Whilst every other major studio has struggled to varying degrees in trying to get their streaming services off the ground, they've just let them battle it out and instead sold the rights to stream their titles. Basically, they're making money off of all these guys desperate for content, and I think that's just quite funny. Of course, every studio comes with their pros and cons, grumbles and adorations, but at least on this front, it's a W for Sony. Anyway, Netflix agreed to change the title back to Mitchells vs. Machines, and it was finally released in April of 2021. Suddenly, a whole new look for a major studio animated movie, and within 28 days of release, it became Netflix's most widely viewed animated title and scored a solid 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie was incredibly well received and even got nominated for Best Animated Feature, which I personally think it should have won. It's an outstanding success that was a major ripple for movies coming to streaming, as well as the new artistic direction first started by the Spider-Verse movies. But before we talk about the future precedent that it set, 3 years on now, why is this such a great movie in the present? Well, we've already gone over the animation style, not only riffing off the different places you could go with it, as introduced by Spider-Verse, but also going completely their own way with it. The character designs alone are a satisfying blend of that animation with Gravity Falls, which obviously makes a lot of sense. I'd even say there's a tiny bit of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs about some of it, again going back to that Lord and Miller connection. However, it's the Mitchell family itself that is really what makes this movie special. Thank you very much for making it halfway through this video. This is the point where I plug in to tell you to subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with future anniversary episodes. There are 5 anniversaries of note for next month. And let me know if you've got any memories attached to this movie, or maybe it's inspired you with its creative and hearty messaging. I'd love to hear it in the comments or on our Discord server. But otherwise, I'll let you get back to the anniversary of Sony's Mitchells vs. the Machines. Katie Mitchell is a perfect Gen Z protagonist. Not only can this current generation empathize with her, but the people who made this movie made it clear that they can relate to her and her place in the world. Most creative people who struggle to feel understood relate to that, myself included. She touches on characters we've seen before and yet feels completely fresh and original still. Using wild animation beats as if she's drawn on the screen herself is also a great touch. It's as if Katie herself got the final edit on the movie, which I just absolutely adore. The animated doodles from her own movie are also pasted all over the actual movie, and much more effectively than those Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of movies, may I add. Some find the 2010 memes beat a bit jarring, which I can totally understand. However, my counter-argument would be that it feels authentic to Katie's character. A talented but young girl who's about to be a film student would make these more adolescent editing choices. Even that kid going to college trope is something we haven't really seen in animation. The only real example I can think of is Toy Story 3, which I gotta mention a gripe here for. Toy Story 3 came out in 2010, right? I was 14. I couldn't relate to Andy. I was a little too young to be going away to college, so I was like, oh, I'm too young to be Andy in this, he's me moment. And Katie in this movie came out in 2021. I finished uni by then. My uni times was 2015 to 2018. There's only 2 animated going to college movies, and I missed both of them. I'm both too old and too young. Why couldn't I be represented at the time? Monsters University was about as close as I got, and that was 2013. Still too young. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Despite the robot uprising thrown in there, the road trip premise set up at the start just continues with the added stakes, exploring with the same themes of the family dynamics. There's some criticism that the mum and son are not as prioritized as much as Dad and Katie, but that's because they're not the protagonist of the story. This is Rick and Katie's story as they try and rekindle their bond before she moves on to the next stage of her life and potentially never sees them again. You know, it's a notable life event that for some parents means that they see their child far, far, far less than they would hope to, especially if they end on naff terms. No matter what crazy crap is happening around them, the movie holds on to the fact that this is the story they are telling. Once you hit the end credits as well, you see how personal this movie was to Mike Rianda. The combined transition from the Mitchells to his real family and the end card dedicating the movie to weirdos everywhere communicates the passion that was put into this project. Having the old family photos of the cast and crew was also a very classy touch that made the movie feel even more personal. And I think that's kind of one of the more astounding elements of this movie. There is clearly so much heart and soul and passion in there. And its affinity to being a little weird and a little bit strange and saying that that's okay and that's good is something that can resonate to so many people in their lives and the weird family dynamics that I'm sure are out there. And it's not necessarily that common. There are all sorts of movies you can see where an adventure takes place or there's some fun slapstick, but to have stories where characters are allowed to specifically be weird or imperfect and just be themselves is a great message for children that I find surprisingly doesn't pop up as often as it should. Not to mention you can extract other details like the fact that Katie is a part of the LGBT community. And though it's clearly not up front and center and part of the plotline, there's all sorts of evidence you can find throughout to prove it. And that as well is a whole new layer of representation that is great to see, especially 3 years ago when it was a lot less common, especially in animation. But okay, yeah, the movie's alright. What is the impact and the ripples it had going forwards into the future? How did it impact the industry now that we are 3 years beyond it? Well, on the one hand, at least for me, it really solidified Lord and Miller's reputation amongst me and seeing their repertoire of past productions. Only adding to the hype as they continued on to Spider-Verse 2, as much as that ended up being animation crunch territory. But still, I also think it made a major bump for Sony as an animation studio to be taken a little bit more seriously. Considering just a few more years back, Sony was known as the people who made the Emoji Movie, for them to turn around and make a masterpiece like this after the super success of Spider-Verse and not crumbling against their own weight, really shows that these guys could be the heavy hitters themselves. Plus, during the phase of 2021, Pixar was showing up with the likes of Soul that flopped financially. Warner Brothers was coming out with the very strange re-rendition of Scooby-Doo in Scoob. And Raya and the Last Dragon was the last thing that Disney had put out, which was a bit of a 50-50 on that front. The fact that they managed to squeak by in the midst of these streaming services, mostly unscathed and certainly not struggling as badly as the others, is a major win that they should really be proud of. Plus, they came to learn that releasing a movie straight to streaming via Netflix is a great way to get so many eyes on. To the point that all sorts of companies continued looking at the streaming service route to the point that we are now. And then going further in the future, we started seeing more copycat inspirations from the likes of the art style of Mitchells vs. Machines. In 2022, DreamWorks came out with The Bad Guys, which has that similar sort of flourish of Spider-Verse-ian effects with the extra 2D additions like Mitchells vs. Machines. And then very recently, last year in 2023, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, which is just so Mitchells vs. Machines coded, but just it's green. Of course, when it comes to the visual cherry picking, that's a lot easier of a thing to duplicate very quickly on, and we're only 3 years on from the first movie. So when exactly we'll start seeing more heart and more family dynamics and tech overlord uprisings coming through might take a little bit more time. Plus, you could argue that will come from more, reflections of the modern day when it comes to the AI uprising, rather than, hey, it's a Mitchells vs. Machines reference. But even still, I think this was a massive, massive success that really did solidify the flag that Spider-Verse brought up, and showed that it could be done in other styles, and could just show so much creative flourishing. Whenever a movie trailer releases showcasing both 3D and 2D animation intermixed in, I just instantly think of Mitchells vs. Machines, and I'm instantly far more hyped for a movie because of it. It dared to push the boundaries of what could be done visually as well as from a writing perspective, because movies with heart are rare to come by, and this is easily my most favorite movie of the decade. Probably in my top 20, to be honest. It is just stellarly done all the way through, except for the fact that the boy's voice is so low. Takes me out of it sometimes. Dare I say it's the best portrayal of a family relationship since The Incredibles, and tells a completely different story with that angle. It's not that if everybody's super, then nobody is. It's that anybody can be special, even if they are not super. After seeing Bob have a complete midlife crisis, it's great to see a father figure struggling with a different issue. Rick seems pretty self-assured with who he is and his worldviews, but that's what's making him struggle in his dynamic with Katie. Plus, this movie's ending to Act 2 has that surprisingly rare Pixar factor where that storyline leads towards you potentially actually crying. It's such a good emotive twist. Its legacy, I do think, has seen more effort being put into animated projects to up the game in its storytelling and the character's journey. I mean, after all, one of the biggest surprises of Puss in Boots 2, beyond the animation, was how strong the exploration of Puss in Boots' character was. It seems DreamWorks is keeping a close eye and certainly taking notes. Animated characters can be completely designed around their personality, and I think Mitchells vs. Machines has played its part in showing how interesting they can be when you give them that depth to explore across the movie. The personal touch, that's the movie's legacy. So 3 years on this fine April 22nd, I say happy birthday, Mitchells vs. Machines. You were for sure one of the greats. And so, as you can see, Mitchells is a movie that's very much near and dear to my heart, and I was a hater at the very start of it. The perfect modern-day animation arc as far as I'm concerned. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour of me slowly changing my opinion on a movie I thought was going to be classic boomer humor. Hopefully giant victories like this in the animation field will pop up again sometime soon. Whether that be from Sony or somebody else, I guess we'll just have to see. But on that note, I shall finally end things off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell me your thoughts on Mitchells vs. Machines and how you felt in the initial trailer, maybe? That'd be interesting to hear, actually. And I shall see you all in a little bit.